It's the daily haul thoughts beyond the cart. And you know I love to shop, but I shop smart. Promo codes and coupons I use, and I can resell for a profit. There's no crying the blues. Visit ushoptoomuch.com. Go on and treat yourself. You know you want to.
Hey, I'm Sunshine, and this is the Daily Haul, Thoughts Beyond the Cart. Nothing here is just about the money. We talk people and purpose, and we talk about everything in this life that carries a price, seen or unseen. So if you're a reseller, a saver, or just someone who shows up for real conversation, pull up a chair. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. As always, this show is sponsored by ushoptoomuch.com, your home for curated finds and vintage treasures. This week's featured item is Paramount Pattern. So if you're looking for a little more than just a pop of color this spring and summer, check these out. As always, I'll drop the link in our show notes. Now, people, today we got a good one. We got a good episode, and we got some feedback from some of our friends over on Facebook and a couple of other places. Now, we've all heard this, the old saying is, no good deed goes unpunished. We've all heard it. And most of us have lived it. But Leo didn't just live it. I have a feeling he may have just financed it. Dollar Scholars, today's email is proof that good intentions do not guarantee a good outcome. I'm calling this episode Flip Cars, Not Friendships. Now, Leo's email had a subject line of sold my friend a car, and now I'm the villain. He writes, Yo, Sunshine, I flip cars on the side. Usually it's all business, but I sold my 2018 sedan to a close friend, Mike, for a buddy price of $6,000. I told him it was running great, and it was. I've been driving it for months. 2 weeks later, the transmission drops. Mike wants a full refund and says I screwed him over. Sunshine, I'm a reseller, not a dealership with a warranty. I already spent that $6,000 on my next project car. Mike is telling our whole friend group that I'm a scammer. Is the price of our friendship worth $6,000? Or should he have known that as is applies even to friends? Signed, Leo. Okay, so let's begin with what I understand to be the legal side. Legally, as is does generally protect private sellers, especially if you're a non-dealer. And, it's going to protect them from any post-sale mechanical issues. As long as this person, like if Leo just knowingly misrepresented the car's condition, that's something totally different. But again, as is as is. And since he genuinely believed that the car was running fine, I feel like he's in the clear legally. That said, morally and socially, I feel like friend sales, they kind of occupy a grayer zone. People, they tend to expect a heads up on any known risk, even a minor one, when there's some sort of trust involved. In this case, the car had been running fine. So I feel like Leo felt like the car was okay to sell. Now, me personally, this is why I always get a PPI, okay? Whenever purchasing a used car. PPI stands for pre-purchase inspection. And what it is a thorough independent evaluation conducted by a qualified mechanic, not cousin Chad, who took auto shop. These are certified mechanics. They're going to inspect the car for leaks, worn belts, hoses, any fluid conditions. Your PPI should include a computer diagnostic check. It should scan for codes to detect any type of hidden problems. If there's been cleared warning lights, they'll check out the body and the frame. They'll check for signs of accidents, repairs, rusts, and paint consistency. I can speak, I promise. Paint consistency. There are things that you can do yourself. I've purchased cars from auctions. I will, go up under the glove compartment and I'll slide my hand on the plastic, feel for sludge, look under the wheel well, look for, this is going to sound weird, I look for weird insects that aren't indigenous to my area. You know how sometimes they get stuck in the grate of the car, like, where the air goes through the front part of the car, because sometimes you could be buying a flood car. And what if Leo bought it and didn't even know what he had? Anyway, this pre-purchase inspection, they're going to check your underbody suspension. They're going to look at your shocks, your struts, your exhaust. They don't just go with a visual test either. They're going to drive that car. They're going to check for transmission shifting. Ding, ding, ding. Braking. They're going to check the suspension performance. And they should also check the electrical and the interior. They'll check the battery. They do it's like a big to-do. It's a whole big once over, they make sure the car is okay. They'll give you a printout and everything. And if there are potential problems, they're going to let you know not only what the problems are, but they're going to let you know what the cost of those issues would be with their particular auto shop, right? So a lot of people avoid stuff like this because does it cost you extra money? Yes, it does. But in my opinion, it's worth it. I think it's worth it to receive a detailed report with even they give you photos sometimes of the issues. And that way, that's going to allow you to walk away from a lemon. You don't have to buy the car. It gives you leverage if you want to try to renegotiate the price or if you just want to feel confident in your purchase. I strongly suggest getting a PPI. And this is a way you're choosing the mechanic who does the PPI, right? Because what a lot of people do is they'll buy a car from a lot, or even in the case of Leo is an independent person who's flipping cars. A lot of times when a person is independent and they're flipping cars, they will have a mechanic look at the car. And then their mechanic will say, oh, well, it does have a this, but other than that, it's solid. And the person who's buying the car they'll listen to that mechanic, right? So it's better to use an independent mechanic and use their inspection report. Because in this scenario, we see this person claims that they didn't know that the car had issues. Leo says he didn't know, right? Now, we know people lie. We also know that there are people who can fix a car just long enough to get it sold, and then it's your problem. So when a seller says as is, now it's caveat emptor, which is Latin for let the buyer beware. It's your job to know as much about your purchase as you can. This way you know whether or not you can turn the key and go, or do you have to spend money? I hate buying something and then having to do something to it. A good friend told me a long time ago, if you buy the best, you only cry once. So I want to try to get something that is as close to perfect as possible so I don't have a lot of extra stuff to do. You know what I'm saying? What am I going to have to do? Am I going to have to do extra work? Now, as someone who grew up around mechanics, I will say that transmissions don't usually drop out of a car. They don't usually just fail. There are usually warning signs and sounds. And if you know cars, you can tell if a car is changing gears properly. You can hear it when it's off. It makes a sound. There's a noise. There's, a hesitation when your car is pulling off. Or your car will just run in the same gear for a long time without shifting properly. So I'm going to take it that even though Leo is flipping cars, I don't want to think he's deceptive. So giving him the benefit of the doubt, I'm going to say that he has very little knowledge of how cars work. And Mike trusted his friend, but a $6,000 investment, Mike should have covered his investment. Now, we've covered the business part, so let's move on to the personal side, which I honestly detest. And this is why I don't do large-scale business with friends or family, because we all know in these cases, it's really not business. Whenever you do business with someone you know well and personally, it's personal. It's not business anymore. And we also know that most friends and family expect the sun, moon, the stars, egg in their beer. My grandmother would say, what do you want, egg in your beer? Ugh. They want all the extras. And they usually expect to pay less and get more. Sorry if that offends anybody, but it's true. That's your family. I'm your boy. I'm your girl, hook me up. That's how people are. So I'm I'm impressed that Leo even got all of his coin up front and wasn't like, accepting payments. So I'm sorry, let me circle back to a slipping transmission. And I feel like in this situation, maybe Leo could start with a message to Mike. And I'll say he should send a message, something in writing, like an email, because clearly everybody's pissed off in this situation. Mike has a car that he cannot drive. Mike is out of $6,000. Leo sold the car. He thought he was done with the car. Giving him the benefit of the doubt, he thought he sold a car that was a good car. It was out of his hair. He was on to his next project. So both of them, I'm sure we're going to be dealing with some tempers flaring. And a conversation between two people when tempers are flared is not the easiest thing to pull off. But a written communication would allow the writer to get their point across without interruption. And it allows the reader, time to take it all in. Perhaps he could start with something like, hey, Mike, I've been thinking about this a lot. I genuinely had no idea the transmission was going to go. I drove that car for months with zero issues. I sold it to you in good faith, and I gave you a real deal because you're my boy. That said, I hear you. I know that it stings, and I don't want this to end a friendship over a car. I can't do a full refund because I can't see. He got a car. He got a physical car. The car can be fixed, right? So I can't see a full refund, me personally. So I would say I can't do a full refund, but I'm open to talking about something fair. Let me know if you want to squash it. I feel like he could offer to return a portion of the funds. But in this situation, we know he took the money and then he invested it in another vehicle. So let's hope first of all, lessons learned. Let's hope that this motivates him to actually confirm that vehicle's condition. Because I'm sorry, but as someone who's getting into the car flipping scene, he doesn't want to build a reputation as one who sells lemons. And everybody knows that bad news travels fast. It travels way faster than good news. So I feel like maybe they could work together. They could find a reputable mechanic who could fix the car. Because I have a hustler's mentality, I would turn this into more money. I would network this thing. Sometimes what they say, what the devil meant for bad, God can turn into good. I would personally try to work with a mechanic. And I would say that in exchange for going easy on the price for fixing this car, since I'm a person who flips cars, I could guarantee you more work in the future. Leo clearly needs a good mechanic if he's going to be flipping cars. And I know some people might disagree, but I value a good friendship more than $6,000. But I'm also not somebody who's going to walk away from all of my money either. And Mike could have got a PPI. Mike could have had JoJo, the backyard mechanic, go look at the car at the very least, but he didn't do any of that. He just purchased the car. So even though Leo referred to the amount as a buddy price, for all we know, that was every dime Mike had to his name. We don't know. Mike could have saved all his dimes, nickels, and pennies and everything, and maybe he couldn't afford a mechanic. I don't know. So I feel like letting him walk away empty-handed, that's just unacceptable, period. And I just feel like there's a way, in my opinion, that everybody can walk away from this thing whole. Now, I truly hope things work out for these guys. And today, I did something a little different. What I did was I wanted to share this before I even recorded my podcast, because a lot of times when I'm doing these podcasts, I'm just giving my feedback. This is how I see it. These are my thoughts. But I wanted to see how far off was I from what other people might think, in this situation. Would I be way off from other people's thoughts? Would I kind of line up? And so I posted the question on my social media. And so I just want to read some comments that I received from people So I'll just read the name. Anthony. Anthony says sold as is. That's an open and shut case. PCPG says the buyer assumed all risks when they bought the car as is. That's the risk with private sales. Hopefully the buyer received all the service records. Maybe there is some indication that the seller knew the transmission was having issues. This is also why everyone needs a mechanic they trust that can inspect the car prior to purchase. Unfortunately, and ultimately, this is on the buyer. Patty says, buyer responsibility, but if good friends, that's different. Might give them some money back to have the car fixed. Helen said, hopefully the buyer purchased some of that additional insurance Iced Tea and Vivica Fox tried to sell. Car show cars go far. Missy said the buyer bought as is. She's got as is in capitals, which means just that. In any court of law, that seller would not have to give any money back. Shay, he says, always have the money to repair a car that's bought as is, or you're going to be pissed when something goes wrong. Chelsea says, there are lemon laws on the books for a reason. 2 weeks and a major failure like this, I believe, is covered under that law in most states. In Arizona, it's 500 miles, I believe. It's on the buyer to have their own inspection, sure, but it's on the seller to reveal any known defects. If the transmission goes out within 2 weeks, the seller not only knew, but also probably did some creative fixes to cover the issue up. Ooh, she's going there. And then she says lemon laws cover used cars bought as is also. Now, Richard came in and he's replied to Chelsea's comment, and he said lemon laws apply to new, used, or certified vehicles purchased from a dealership. They do not apply in this sale between private parties. Now, if the buyer could prove the seller deceived them and knew about the faulty transmission, then he could take the seller to small claims court. So then Chelsea replies back to Richard. She says, understood. But if the transmission went out within 2 weeks, they knew. Transmission, engine, there are certain things where there are clear warning signs before they fail. And those warning signs don't come up suddenly. When my transmission was failing, my first indication was the check engine light. Then you have multiple signs, weird sounds, fluid leaking, sluggish start, jerky shifting, etc. If it was the alternator or something, that sucks. Sorry about your luck. But I find it hard to believe there were no warning signs for a transmission completely failing in 2 weeks. If they can prove the seller was fraudulent with temporary fixes, like a new speed sensor is easy to visibly observe, for example, the lemon law could be applied. Richard comes back and says, I think your point would be valid if someone were selling to a stranger. But in this scenario, it was a sale between friends. I would like to think that a person wouldn't knowingly deceive someone they called a friend, because that would definitely be the end of the friendship. I agree. Orland comes in, and Orland says, in some unfortunate cases, cars do what they do. It might seem like the buyer sold a lemon, but in some cases, cars just fail when they fail. Now, if the friend was dishonest, that's not a good friend. Shame on him. However, when you buy a car for $6,000 or even sell a car for $6,000, I'm sure you pretty much checked it out before you sold it, and I'm pretty sure you should check it out before you buy it. However, cars can be finicky sometimes, and it happens, unfortunately. Mar, if y'all hear snoring, that is my little tiny dog, and he sounds like a grown man snoring. Mar said, yes, of course, the repairs fall on the buyer. However, I believe a good friend would help out a friend with the repairs. I'm not going to sell my friend a car and it break down on them in 2 weeks, 2 weeks later, and leave them hanging. Carmen should always have it looked at prior, but as is means as is. Lamar says, in the state of Ohio, the buyer purchased the vehicle as is, so the buyer assumes all repairs after the purchase. Richard, the buyer is solely responsible for the repair. Any mechanical part on a car can fail at any time, and the as-is disclaimer covers the seller of any liability. Luann says, it's sold as is. The buyer is now responsible. I also had a couple of direct messages. Timothy said, from my experience, transmissions do not just fail. They give some type of symptom before they fail, such as shuddering, making some type of noise, stalling when accelerating, jerking, and it's usually not intermittent. Usually that symptom shows up each time it's drove. So if the buyer test drove the car before buying with no issues, then drove it for 2 more weeks, then it started happening, the buyer is on their own. Why? Because driving habits are key. I don't know how you drive when I'm not around, or who you allowed to drive it and how they drove it. Many people like to burn out, do donuts, or even think they're a race car driver. So that's their problem at this point. The car was sold as is, not with a if this happens. I had my transmission rebuilt in 2024 because it was jerking and on its way out. I took it to GMC to confirm it was the tranny. Took it to Amoco for the rebuild. Now it's in the shop because of the torque converter, which is located down in the transmission. Not as pricey as the rebuild, but the tranny would give you symptoms before going out. And to be fair, I do a lot of towing with my lawn equipment. So now we see that there are things that can affect a car. Even pulling weight with a car can affect the transmission. So I said to this gentleman that, yeah, we were definitely on the same page. And he came back and said, yeah, he has very little knowledge. But here's what people do. People get in the car, they drive with the music up. So 1, they can't hear the unusual sounds that were probably going on. And 2, they feel the shifting issues and disregard them until there's a major problem. So that's from Timothy. And we also had another one. The buyer, this is from Terry Moorer. The buyer should have done a pre-inspection on the car, but it's still hard to tell on a transmission. Depending on the state, as is releases the seller of any responsibility unless the seller knew the transmission was bad before the sale. So it seems to me like as a community, we're all on the same page. We all agree that he should have, checked the car out before he made such a large purchase. We also feel that if Leo had any inkling that there was something wrong with the car, he should have revealed it to his friend. Or he shouldn't have sold the car. He should have just went on ahead, got the car fixed, and maybe he could have even sold it for more. Because the way he called it a buddy price, it's a 2018, it's $6,000. He's indicating that the car is probably worth more than $6,000. What I'm thinking is, maybe he felt like because the car is worth more than $6,000, let's give it a price of $10,000. So maybe in Leo's mind, that invisible $4,000 is just in case money. You would have paid $10,000, but I'm going to give it to you for $6,000 just in case something happens. There's that invisible buffer for you to pay for things that you would have paid for anyway had you got the $10,000 car. I hope this makes sense. I feel like I'm explaining it poorly. Like, if you had bought the car for $10,000, then this thing wouldn't have been wrong with it. But because this thing may be wrong with it, you're only paying $6,000. And so that, that's a slick way of doing business. And I would hope that he would have said, hey, this is wrong, or this may be wrong, but I'm going to give it to you for this buddy price of $6,000. That way, if anything goes wrong, you can just fix it. The problem there is if Leo saved up all of his money and that was his last, if Mike saved up all of his money and that was his last $6,000, then there is no $4,000 buffer. There is no extra money for these invisible, unforeseen things that, we don't know about. So I hope that's not the case. I hope this isn't one of those situations where Leo has made a very hefty assumption. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. I do hope these gentlemen walk away. They won't walk away whole, but I hope everybody, number one, I hope they keep their friendship intact. And I hope that they find a way where everybody feels like they've been treated fairly. Leo gets to keep some of his money. He's willing to help Mike with the car, so Mike isn't just SOL, if you will, behind the car. Because who wants to spend that kind of money and have nothing to show for it? It wouldn't be me. Absolutely not. So before I close out today's session, well, first let me back up and say thank you to everybody who participated. And let me just go over the names real quick. So we had Terry Moorer, we had Terrence. Look, not Terrence. We had Terry Moorer. We had Timothy Fulham. We had PCPG all the way from Japan. We had Patty, Helen, Missy, Shay, Chelsea, Orlin, Mar, Carmen, Lamar, Beverly. Beverly said they had a good friendship already. Best friends and family can sometimes be your worst enemies. And when a car is sold as is, that's a red flag. Which, let me just say, when somebody says as is, you kind of got to ask the question, as is what? What is the is? And that's why you check out a car. Anyway, I digress. Richard, Real Talk, Anthony, and Lou Ann, thank you all for participating. You made this a very fun episode. I appreciate you for taking what I know to be your very precious time out to comment on my little old post, and I hope that you will engage with me in the future. I won't make a habit of it, honestly, posting these things on Facebook. I will reserve them for, just special subjects where I feel like other people might want to give their input, because I get some very unique emails. And for those of you who have not been listening, my this podcast in particular is centered around, or I should say, was birthed by my reselling, me being in the reselling and buying, selling. I never trade, but I am a reseller. I'm an upseller. I'm an upcycler. And so I can take something for $50 and I can sell it for $250. I can sell it for $600. I've sold something for $5 that was, I paid $5 for, and I sold it for $110. And that may sound crazy, but when you get into very hard to find items, when you get into rare items, when you get into things that are no longer sold in stores, it's like my dad always said, things are worth what people are willing to pay for them. And somebody's going to make that money, and it might as well be me. So thank y'all for listening. And before I go, I want to leave y'all with a quote from Socrates. And to say I'm not, this is my religion. Stoicism is not a religion. And I've talked to people and I've told them that I've been studying Stoicism, and they're like, oh my God, are you not a Christian anymore? They're not connected. And the Stoics, they have some really good information. And a lot of the things that the Stoics practice, we're still practicing to this day. Now, Socrates, to be clear, he was not a Stoic. He was actually around a couple hundred years before the Stoics, started. And they actually view Socrates as kind of like their godfather. They viewed him as a saintly figure. So we would call that person a role model in our society. So they did have, as we say, mad love for Socrates. And my favorite Stoic is Epictetus. And so Socrates, he was, like I said, these people were around thousands of years before us, but they were still, the quotes and the things that they wrote about, we're still dealing with these things today. And Socrates said, be slow to fall into friendship, but when thou art in, continue firm and constant. So be careful diving into a quick friendship. But once you have a friend, and clearly Mike is Leo's friend, be firm, be constant. Don't play your friends. Be fair. Be fair. That's a golden rule. If we all just try to be fair with one another, make sure we're all okay, take care of one another, and sometimes that may mean taking a little bit of a personal loss, I think the world would be a better place. I really, really appreciate you all for listening. And if you are listening and you have a show idea, if you have a topic you want to discuss, if you had a situation in a store. Again, it's not just about reselling. This is about anything that deals with shopping, reselling. If you encountered a rude customer, if you witnessed something in a store, I want to hear about all of it. So you can send your emails to me at ifshoppingwascardio@gmail.com. Again, that is ifshoppingwascardio@gmail.com. Until next time, y'all be safe. Bye.